Kamran, and today I'm going to present about our research on the design components for serious game. This is part of our research project on the children with autism, and we tend to build a serious game for the reading comprehension and how could we improve the reading comprehension skills of the children with autism spectrum disorder. So before we start, let me quickly give you what we actually have done so far before moving on to this one. Since this is all about using the technology and using the serious games to improve their reading comprehension skills, we did our brief systematic review on the use of the technology that has been done so far regarding the reading comprehension skills. How could we use those skills? So we found that there isn't much technology that has been used for these children. So then we extended the scope that since not much work has been done on the serious games for the reading comprehension skills, so we extended our scope of the research to see what sort of games have been developed for the children with autism in general to improve their different skills like social communication or the speaking and writing and so on. We found that a very little amount of work has been done. So we were like, how could we, since there aren't many guidelines or the frameworks available for such children, so it becomes a bit difficult for the researchers to want to create a game. So what we have done so far is we have carried out the literature review, and this paper is all about what has been collected from the literature review to see what components could possibly be used in the games that could be potentially built for the autism children. These children, as we know, they have a neurological disorder and they face impairments in the social communication skills. They might not be social, they might be facing difficulties in communicating with people, as well as they might be performing certain tasks repeated amount of time, many times. So, but one thing that is interesting for these children is they are the visual learners. When they see things, they grasp what has been taught to them. So we thought that it's better for us to use some sort of game-based technology, because games are the students and the children, they use games a lot on a regular basis. So why don't we use this similar concept to improve their skills? We know that the first definition was given by the board in the 1930s, early 60s, and the definition has not been changed much since the earlier days. And it's all about using the serious games not only for the entertainment, but the primary purpose should be focused more on the education aspect. So the serious game is a combination of not only the entertainment, but it's also a combination of the education. We have been hearing a lot about the serious games since yesterday, and we have seen that quite a few number of serious games has been developed. But the major problem for the researchers and the developers is not much framework or the components have been emphasized that how those games should be developed. So we searched for the frameworks which have been developed for the games as well as serious games, and we found that few games frameworks are available which does focus on, although there are many frameworks, but these are 4 frameworks which basically focus on the design aspects of the game rather than the other aspects of the game. And one of the framework by the user will basically relate to this focusing more precisely on the serious games than the other one. So what we basically did is we saw that what sort of components have been emphasized in these frameworks and what are the common components which have been used and which are basically required for the games that can be seen. So we found that basically for creating any serious game, we should have to have some basic components which are required. For instance, we do need instruction contents. What are we going to teach? We should have to have the learning activities in which the students or the children are going to take part in. They should have to have the user profiles as well as the game feature in general and the mechanics, how those components will be somehow implemented. These are the important components which are required from the general perspective, means the general typical users. But since we are dealing with the children with autism, they face different, they have the neurological disorders. So we need to consider those children with children as well. So these children, for teaching these children, we use different sort of teaching methodologies. So we need to consider how the education can be provided into the games through these methods. If we are going to use these methods, this is more likely that the children will learn more than the other methods. And then we do need to consider the design principles for the children with autism perspective, not only from the typical user, because if we are going to only consider the design principles which are only for the typical user, they might be facing difficulty. And this is another component which is important, is the modalities. What sort of modalities are we going to use? Are those modalities suitable for these children? Can they use speaking? Can they use writing, touch pen? Can they use other sort of modality for the communication? So then we thought, based on all the literature, we created a sort of, we kept all the components, we saw the relationship between how the relationship goes on between all these components. So these all components basically have been driven from the literature based on what has been typically required for the general users as well as from autism perspective. So instruction method, as I was telling you about there are certain instruction methods which are specifically meant for the autism perspective, and these are the ones, for instance, the discrete trial timing, in which the children the activities are divided into different aspects, and for each activity they are given certain amount of time, and if they are unable to perform the activity, they are going to give them some sort of informal feedback so that they can redo the thing again, so in order to get them some more exposure, and instead of giving them the negative feedback, they can do some more work. So, and then this is one of the interesting instruction method, picture exchange communication system, in which pictures are used as a mode of communication between the children and the other one. So similarly, all the methods, the teaching that we incorporate in the games has to be some sort of validated through the theory. So we can use different theoretical aspects to see how could those be implemented, and we can see there are different. These are just an example. Like we can use a behavioral theory to give them some sort of reward whenever they perform some activity, as well as a proper feedback, and let them repeat as many times as they want, because if they repeat anything for multiple times, then they can grasp the information more than not doing it again. So, as I told you that for the design, it's important that we should consider those children also in addition to the typical users. So, there are certain guidelines which have been recommended. So, these are the two important we can say the references which can be used, because they have done a lot of literature review on the guidelines which are specifically meant for the children with autism. If we implement those guidelines, it is most likely that the children with autism will be having a good time playing those games. We already know a lot about the genders and user profile and achievement. Anything that has been done by the users should be saved in some sort of profile, and all those achievements have been done so that they can later on go back to and see their profile, as well as they can perform some activity anytime they want. Modalities, we know that there are different types of modalities. It could be unimodal, multimodal, or bimodal. But the important thing is we need to see what sort of modalities they can use. And research has shown that before we start implementing all those modalities, it's important to check whether this modality will be feasible for those children or not, as well as the mechanisms. So basically these individual activities, each activity that we perform should have to have some sort of outcomes as well as the contents. So based on what the children is going to do should be based on the learning objectives. So this is how we actually try to compare the things related to what are we doing and what has been done in the CS games. And we can see there are similarities because we are trying to get those components from the literature review. So we can see some sort of similarities between our framework and the component that we tend to emphasize for the framework, as well as the framework which has precisely focused on the CS games. However, we do add some components which are related or specifically meant for the autism perspective, and which are based on the guidelines which we need to focus on specifically, as well as the instruction method that is importantly required, as well as all the modalities which the researcher designer or the researcher or the designer is tend to using. So we can see that the key components, the differences are in terms of the previous one, the framework that we are comparing, they tend to use some profile, but they do not actually mention that what sort of achievement have been saved in the framework. So all the components that we see, they already inform about that these are the differences between the guidelines as well as the modalities. And the modalities could possibly be in the form of the fusion and the fusion. So basically this is all about the work that we have been done so far, and we tend to do some sort of preliminary studies to see, and find out more on through the observations and expert reviews to see what sort of more components could be possibly integrated into this framework for the game design, serious game design for the autism. If you have any questions, maybe.
He made his presentation short, so we have time for questions. If you have any question or comments, please feel free to ask.
Are there any games built yet based on this model?
No, since it's in the preliminary stage, so we have done the literature review so far, so we are going to connect, because ultimate goal is to develop the game. But since we have not seen the frameworks available for these children, so we tend to do the literature review first, so as we can gather the information, get the expert reviews done, and then we're going to. So the next part is to build the prototype based on this framework.